Hey, good morning, everybody. I have right at 10:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Ashley Edwards. I serve as our Extension Beef Cattle Specialist for the LSU Ag Center. I'm hosting today. This is the second webinar in our Fall Beef Brunch educational series. So last week, I presented on how to calculate the amount of hay that your cattle will need to go through, particularly the fall and winter, but really throughout the year. Today we have Miss Abigail Sartin, who's coming in, and she is going to discuss what to do when your hay needs fall short. So Abigail covers Vermilion, Acadia, and St. Mary parishes as our livestock and forages agent. She has a background in beef cattle nutrition and has given several similar presentations on this previously, and thought she did a fantastic job. And so I asked her to come in and help me put this series together, figure out the best topics to match in this series and to present for us today. So if you're online live, you should be able to see the Q&A button. You can enter your questions in there at any point. We'll wait until the end to give those to Abigail so that she can answer them. If you were watching the recording of this on YouTube, I'll put Abigail's email in there and you can reach out to her or reach out to your local extension agent for any questions that you may have regarding this topic. With that, Abigail, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Edwards. As Dr. Edwards said, my name is Abigail Sartin, and I cover Vermilion, Acadia, and St. Mary parishes as the livestock agent here. I'm going to keep my camera off just because sometimes the Wi-Fi in Vermilion can be a little bit spotty. But with that, I'll kind of jump right into this presentation. So last week, Dr. Edwards kind of talked about calculating your hay needs for the feeding season. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some supplementation strategies and things to do when the hay that you have in your inventory falls short of meeting cattle nutrient requirements. And one of the reasons that I feel like this is important to talk about is because as a whole, the Southeast produces a lot of hay. So in one study from Mississippi State, they found that over 2.5 million acres of hay are produced annually between Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, and Florida. So obviously that's a lot of hay. But we still kind of run into this problem where nutritive values of that hay, so TDN, crude protein, some of those things, are still too low to meet dietary requirements of certain beef cattle classes. We'll kind of get into what I mean by beef cattle classes, but just as a prelude, mostly I'm talking about our cattle with really high requirements. So in our case, as a cow-calf state, that would typically be our cows that are lactating. So in my mind, there's kind of two pieces to this puzzle, and we'll touch on how these things kind of go together. But there's the forage quality side of things. So producing forage that is high in crude protein, high in TDN, that can meet cattle needs. So we kind of have these two pieces, but the unique thing is that they really work together. So if you can manage your forage quality, you can also meet cattle needs without the need for a lot of excess supplementation. Granted, that can be challenging, and some people may not be making all of their own hay. They might be purchasing too. So I'm going to hit on that a little bit in this talk. So if you are one of those people that purchases hay, there's still some ways that you, even though you specifically don't control your forage quality, there's still some things that you can do to check on that quality and see if it's going to work for the class of cows that you intend to feed. So this is a graphic that I actually borrowed from Dr. Charlie Hutchison. I know he also gives a lot of nutrition talks and works at the Ag Center. So I really liked how he staggered this. He's basically trying to illustrate the importance of forage quality in a beef system. And Louisiana, I feel, is a really unique state because our climate, especially as you move south where I'm located in the state, we have the opportunity to grow forage almost 365 days of the year. And what I mean by that is we can take advantage of winter annuals like ryegrass in this part of the state. And we can also take advantage of our warm season annuals like Bahia, Bermuda grass, things like that in the summer. Perennials, sorry, I think I misspoke and said annuals. But regardless, our highest forage quality should be allocated for animals that have the highest nutrient requirements. So that's what you're kind of looking at here on this pyramid. It's showing you where you should put emphasis on providing the highest quality of forage. So early lactation and late gestation for our cow-calf guys, that's really where you want to start focusing and thinking about, okay, what's the highest quality of forage that I can be providing for my cattle at this point? The reason I mentioned ryegrass is because in Louisiana, that's probably the highest quality forage we have access to. It's very challenging for us to grow things like alfalfa down here. So ryegrass is going to be one of those things, but not everyone has the availability or the inputs to put into ryegrass. So we might be relying a little bit on hay. If that's the case, then that's why we recommend some forage testing and things like that to see what you're working with, so you can kind of allocate your highest quality of hay in your barn or that you're purchasing to cattle based on exactly what you're looking at here, where they are in production. So we talk a lot about forage quality. I feel like that's a term we kind of throw around a lot, especially I'm guilty of it with a background in nutrition, and I kind of take it for granted and don't really ever define it. So when I'm talking about forage quality, I'm talking about the ability of that forage to generate a production response. So we use this term nutritive value, and we kind of use it interchangeably with forage quality without ever really saying what that means. And I also wanted to give, I'm very big on an example or an analogy that really helps me understand things. So when I say a production response, what does that mean? Well, if you're someone who might background steers or background cattle before you wean them and take them, or before you take them to the sale barn, then you're going to be concerned with weight gain. So in that sense, a production response is that weight gain, those pounds. If you're a cow-calf producer, then that gain that you'd be looking for the forage to elicit is lactation. So the more pounds of forage that cow eats, that's high quality, the more she might milk, or those kinds of things. So it's always easy for me to understand it, or easier for me to understand it if I can make some sort of correlation. So that's just basically what I'm trying to illustrate here. Another thing that we mention a lot is forage quality. And typically I'm talking about kind of crude protein, TDN, some of those factors. And quality is driven by a lot of different things. I mean, we could have our own presentation separately about forage quality, but one thing that you influence directly as a producer, someone who might be making hay, is maturity. Granted, I know that weather can be finicky here in Louisiana. Sometimes it's wet, sometimes it's dry, sometimes we can't make it work to get in when we want to, but with that in mind, we can kind of prioritize our goals. So if we know, hey, my goal is to harvest every 30 days or whatever that might be, but you don't get in quite at that 30-day mark, maybe it rained, you had to wait a week. It's important to keep records, write those things down, and sort that hay in the barn and know, like, I didn't get quite where I wanted to cut on this one, so it might be a little less quality. Just knowing those things and knowing how those factors influence quality is very, very important. And there's kind of this inverse relationship between quality and quantity. So what do I mean by that? Well, immature forage, so like when you think about in the springtime, early spring moving into summer, when we start to get some accumulation of biomass in our warm season perennial pastures, it's really green, it's really lush, doesn't have any kind of seed heads on it or anything like that. That immature forage is very high quality, but it's low yielding. So if you were to make a cutting at that point, you wouldn't get as many bales of forage. Whereas on the other side of the screen, you'll see here, we've got some mature forage with seed heads on it. So that's high yield. You would get more pounds per acre or more bales of that, but it would be of a lower quality because it's starting to mature and put energy into that seed head. So just keep that inverse relationship in mind. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have some cuttings that are more on the mature side, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to have several that are on the low side. You just want to, the low yielding side, you just want to stagger those and know when and where that fits into your production setting. So this mature forage over on this side isn't probably what we want to be feeding to our gestating cows just because it doesn't have the energy to support that production response that we need to support that lactation. Whereas on the other side, this immature quality forage likely would be able to help support lactation more. So with that, kind of touched on it, we have this dilemma where we have quality and quantity and this inverse relationship. There's also a nutritional component to that. So the more mature a forage is, the less cattle are physically able to eat. Dr. Edwards touched on this last week and did a really good job. So basically, the more mature it is, the longer it takes to get through the rumen. So it might sit there a little longer. They have more gut fill, but it's taking more time for that to break down and digest for them to eat. So on the flip side of that, if it's less mature, we can get more intake. It moves through the system faster, and they're going to be able to eat more and more of that. But they'll actually end up as a whole eating less because they're able to satisfy their nutrient requirements quicker. So when hay is mature, it's actually lower quality, and we can run into situations where we are actually feeding a low quality source of forage. Last year, I know, was a very unique year for Louisiana where we had that drought. So there were people calling about things like rye straw and corn stalks. When we feed a lot of those really high fiber feeds that are lower in quality, sometimes we can actually get to a point where we reduce intake because of that gut fill, and cattle actually can't eat enough in a given day to satisfy their nutrient requirements. So we want to try our best to avoid situations like that. But kind of did some rambling about some of the nutritional components and want to get down to some of the logistics. So how do I know my hay quality? Well, last week, Dr. Edwards told you you don't ever want to guess. You have the capability to know. So that's why we really, really encourage you to test your hay, and we want you to know what you're working with. So this is an example of if you took a hay sample, which your local county agent can help you with, what you would get back from the LSU Ag Center. So this is overwhelming to look at, honestly. I mean, there's a lot of different things on here, and that's what we're here for as your county agents, as your beef specialists. We're here to help you interpret these things, and we want you to know that and be able to reach out to us. So some of the most important things to focus on are the crude protein, which you'll see right here. And you always, you'll see these two columns, the as received and the dried sample basis. We always want to formulate rations or diets on that dried sample basis. So it's important to look at that as well. Another important thing to look at is TDN, which is your total digestible nutrients. And that is essentially the amount of energy that's in a forage. So when we talk about forage quality and nutritive value, those terms that we hit on earlier, these are the kind of things that we're referencing. Another important thing that LSU actually gives you, which I think is really awesome, is dry matter intake. So all these nutrient requirements and things that we're going to start talking about in the next few slides are actually a function of dry matter intake. And we talked about how forage quality influences dry matter intake. So the fact that LSU gives you the amount of your forage that cattle can eat makes it very easy or easier. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it to formulate rations and to make sure that you're actually meeting cattle nutrient requirements. So that's another thing I also encourage producers to look at. And once again, if you're ever confused about what any of these things mean or how to use these things, don't hesitate to reach out to your resources through the Ag Center. So now that I've done this, I've tested my hay quality. What's next? What do I do with all these numbers? Well, now we can use them and compare them to our actual cow requirements. So we talked about kind of that hierarchy of needs. Think back to that pyramid, and we talked about where we need to allocate our highest quality resources. So one thing I also encourage producers to do is to get these tests and kind of match up the test with where the hay is in the barn. Kind of have an idea in your brain, draw it a map, whatever works for you, and know, all right, the hay that's highest quality is in this corner of the barn, the hay that's lowest quality is in this corner of the barn. That way you can pull it out and allocate it to those classes of cattle. So when we talk about the times of highest quality forage need, we talked about peak lactation. So the highest time of requirements for cow-calf, I'm mostly focusing on the cow-calf side of things today, talking about the cows, but we also have resources through the Ag Center. I'm happy to help. I know Dr. Marcello is probably happy to help as well. If you ever have questions about stocker cattle or anything like that as well. But for today, we're mostly going to talk about the cows. So their highest requirement is 60 to 90 days post-calving because that's when their peak lactation is. So I provided a chart here adapted from Oklahoma State University that gives you a range of 1,100 to 1,400 pounds because that's one thing that's very important that sometimes gets overlooked. We have these nutrient requirements, but we might assume that our cows are 1,100 pounds, or we might see these numbers online, and some of these nutrient requirements, like Dr. Edwards talked about last week, are formulated for cows that are 1,000 pounds. And we work with a lot of Brahman-influenced cattle here in Louisiana, and they're a lot larger in frame size. How feasible is it for some of those to be 1,000 pounds? It's not impossible, but it's probably not as accurate as we need it to be. So that's why having these weights is very, very important. Provides you with a lot of other useful information, but mostly I want us to kind of focus on the TDN in pounds per day and crude protein in pounds per day, because those are some of the things that we're going to need to figure out how much supplement we need in the case that our hay does fall short. So this is for other cow needs, so gestating cows in the middle and last third of their pregnancies. So these are times of lower nutrient needs, but are still important to consider. And I also wanted to include those because it's important to note that most hay, average quality hay, can actually satisfy these requirements alone. You really probably don't need any additional supplement during this time of a cow's gestation cycle. So these are also useful numbers to have and compare to your hay because, you know, we don't want to waste money on supplementing with feed if hay alone can take care of this. So with that, I also kind of wanted to touch on some feed sources. This is a question we kind of get through the Ag Center a lot. Protein sources, we recommend things like soybean meal. Another common one people use is range cubes, dried distillers grains, cottonseed meal. These can also be sources of TDN as well, which is energy. So another common energy source that we'll see used is corn. I put cracked in parentheses because anytime you're buying corn as a cattle feedstuff, it's important to remember that that corn needs to be processed in some kind of way, if at all possible. Whole corn, they'll break up some of that through chewing, but for them to actually receive all the energy that's available in the corn, it's best for it to be cracked or processed, opened some kind of way so that the enzymes can get in and break down the starch that's in there. Another source that might be common is cottonseed hulls. We can kind of double up on some of these sources, so they might provide TDN and protein. This is just kind of a general list. And then I want to move into the actual logistics of how would we calculate need. So in this situation, I have said that we sent off our hay sample to the LSU lab and we got some results back. So it tested at 55% TDN and 8% crude protein. We used those tables a few slides back and determined we have some peak lactation cows, so their requirements are 60% TDN and 11% crude protein, which means they're eating roughly 35.8 pounds per day. Doing some math here to calculate those needs, that comes out to 21.1 pounds of TDN, and those numbers are in that table, but also just wanted to show you how you would go about calculating them if you didn't have that table right there in front of you. So this cow is eating roughly 2.6% of her own body weight, which is also available for you to see in that table. And so that comes out, these are her daily requirements here for TDN and crude protein. And then the next thing we need to do is see what the hay itself provides. So that 55% TDN multiplied by how many pounds per day she's eating is 19.69 pounds. And then the 8% of crude protein is 2.9 pounds of crude protein per day. So you can kind of see here, now we can compare what the diet she's eating is providing, how that compares to her nutrient requirements. So we got that cow here. Well, we're actually short 1.41 pounds of TDN and 1 pound of crude protein. This is probably one of the most common situations that you would encounter here in Louisiana that I've kind of dealt with in my role. And so then the question becomes, what do we do? What do we feed in order to meet these needs? So now we have to come up with a supplementation plan. We got to figure out where we're lacking. Is it crude protein? Is it TDN? Is it both? because in this situation we just worked through, we're short on both. So now we can talk about feed options. We can call our extension agent. We can call Dr. Edwards, the state beef specialist, and determine, hey, what are some feed options if I'm short on crude protein that I could find throughout the state? What is a source of TDN? What's a source of both? And we want to price that feed stuff on a per ton basis, because most brokers, if you're going to buy a commodity or something like that, are going to price that per ton. We also want to price it per pound of TDN and per ton of crude protein. Oh, I put TDN and energy. I meant TDN and crude protein. Sorry, I'll have to fix that. So we want to price it on those bases as well, because we want to both address the nutrient side of it, combat those shortages, but we also want to do it in the most economically feasible way possible. So here's some examples of some common feeds. Corn gluten feed is one that some producers will take advantage of through the state of Louisiana. So using the NRC, the nutrient requirements of beef cattle, I pulled up the TDN and crude protein of that. And then we use those numbers from our example. So we were 1.41 pounds short in TDN. So we can take that shortage and divide that by how much TDN is in the feed, and that would tell us roughly how many pounds of corn gluten feed each animal would need per day to combat that shortage. But remember, we were also short in crude protein, so we're going to have to figure out that shortage as well. So that comes out to about 4.4 pounds of corn gluten feed to address that crude protein shortage, and about 1.8 pounds to address that TDN shortage. So that gives us a total about 6.2 pounds per cow per day. We can just do some quick math too. We'll say you've got about 50 cows maybe. So that would come out to you knowing now, just like Dr. Edwards demonstrated last week, you need about 310 pounds of corn gluten feed for 50 cows per day. So that can help you figure out throughout the feeding season how much you would need. Another popular example is range cubes. So I just wanted to kind of compare these to each other. Going through the same math process, I won't work through that exactly again, but it comes out that we'll need 7.2 pounds roughly of range cubes, which comes out to about 360 pounds for 50 cows. And then one thing I really want to drive home is, does hay quality make that big of a difference? So let's say now we're doing the same thing again, but this time we have hay that's slightly better quality. So now we're up to 60% TDN and 9% crude protein. Still have the same needs, none of that's changed, same math process. Well, now the TDN requirements are met just by moving up 5% TDN units. All of our TDN requirements are met, so we're no longer having to compensate for that, and we just have to make up for a 0.7 pound deficit in crude protein. So now, using those same feed sources, corn gluten feed and some range cubes, now we only need 3 pounds, or roughly between 3 and 3.5 pounds, depending on which feed source per cow per day. We have cut our feed needs for each cow nearly in half. So using that same example, if we had 50 cows, now we only need 175 pounds per day. So that is pretty much exactly half. So I'm just trying to illustrate and really drive home that hay quality is very, very important. We've only moved up 1% of crude protein here. I mean, we went from, in my other example, 8%, wanted to go back and confirm that, to 9% now. Just moving up 1% has nearly cut our feed needs in half. So just think about that when you're buying hay, when you're making hay, that, focusing on cutting every 30 days, if possible, weather permitting, and really focusing on getting the quality and preserving that quality is really, really going to pay off for you when it comes time to figure out what to supplement. So in summary, I really want to drive home that proper forage management has the capability to satisfy cattle nutrient requirements with little to no supplemental feed. We always encourage you to test your hay and know what you're working with. You can take a lot of the guesswork out of it, and you can ensure that you're not underfeeding or overfeeding cows. You can then use the analysis of that hay test as well to work with ag center personnel and nutritionists, whoever that might be, to match the analysis with cattle needs and make a supplement plan that's strategic. It provides the cows with what they need, but also is least cost for you as the producer. My biggest take-home message is whether you're buying hay, whether you're making hay, do it with cattle nutrient requirements in mind. Fertilization and more frequent harvests resulted in a greater amount of hay at a lower cost and reduced the amount of supplementation and total feed costs for producers. This study was done at Mississippi State. And I wanted you to also know that it's possible. So this is a feed test from a producer I've worked with in Vermilion Parish, very progressive, puts a lot of emphasis into making high quality hay. And he's able to get crude proteins of about 15% and TDN of about 69%. So he does not have to feed any supplement at all on his operation. That's just a personal goal of his. You don't have to take it to that extreme. But overall, I just really want to drive home the fact that Louisiana is such a unique state in terms of what we can do with forage. And I just want producers to capitalize on that if at all possible. So with that, I really thank you guys so much for the opportunity to be here and speak with you all. I'll be happy to take any questions. Here's my contact information too. Love to talk about this stuff. Love to help you out any way that I can. So please, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. We'll give it just a minute or so. I don't have any questions in the Q&A currently, but for those of you online live with us, if you do have any questions, please get those in. Abigail, thank you not only for presenting today, but for helping me put this series together. It's a timely topic, but it's also, as we all know, very important and one that we keep getting a lot of questions on. So I appreciate all the work that you've put into this with me.
Yes, of course. I'm happy to do it.
I'm not seeing any questions pop up.
Okay.
Again, if y'all do have those, you can send them to me or send them to Abigail. Her information's here. Reach out to your local agent. As she said, and I mentioned earlier, we're all here to help you. This is something that, you know, we say it all the time. She said it several times. I said it last week. It's so worth it. It's worth it to have everything tested. It's worth it to take the time to go in and make sure we are meeting all those requirements so that your cattle perform at their maximum potential. Next week, we have Dr. Marcelo Vitavato coming in. So that'll be Tuesday, the 22nd. Again, we'll be live at 10:30. You'll be able to log on the same way that you logged on today. And he'll be discussing mineral requirements. He'll be discussing mineral requirements for grazing beef cattle. And that will wrap up our series for this winter. We are looking for topics to be able to do both a spring and a fall webinar series each year. So if there's a specific topic that y'all would like to see a series on, please send those ideas to us. We're here to provide this information for y'all and want to present on things that y'all are looking for specifically. That being said, these are recorded and they will be posted at some point in time. Probably give me a week or so to make sure we get the transcripts together and get those online for you, but they will be on our YouTube channel. And the agents will email out all those links once they have them. With that, we hope you all have a great day, and we'll hopefully see you next week for Dr. Vitavato's talk. Thank you again, Abigail.
Yes, thank you all.